I don't want to protect my privilege. I want it gone. I think that's the only genuine approach to philanthropy. It's to make sure that it abolishes itself.
Foundations are saying, things are a little challenging, but we feel pretty good about our prospects. Nonprofits are saying, this is the crisis of our lifetimes.
It's always about the future. We're going to use it in the future, to which I always respond, well, why are you going to be any good at using it in the future when you're not any good at using it now?
Hey, Break Fake Rules listeners, Communications Claire here from the Stupski Foundation. Today, you're going to hear a conversation with our CEO, Glen Galaich, and today's co-host, the always entertaining Eric Brown. Eric is the principal of Brownbridge Strategies, a top-notch strategy and communications consulting firm. He's also the co-host of one of our favorite podcasts called Let's Hear It. Make sure you check it out. A little later on, they'll be joined by philanthropic fake rule-breaking legend, Marlene Engelhorn, co-founder of Tax Me Now. You may have heard of her tax reform advocacy or her bold decision to have a citizen council of 50 everyday Austrians give away the bulk of her inherited wealth. Marlene is proving what becomes possible when you reject the philanthropic fake rule playbook and get money to communities in ways they determine they need it now. Rule breakers, we're glad you're here.
Welcome to another exciting edition of Break Fake Rules. We are rolling now into another co-host. You have now been exposed to Jamie Allison, to Ralph Lewin. I know you've been on the edge of your seat for weeks now wondering who could the third one be? Who will it be? What will they do now?
Bad news for you, people.
You don't know this fellow. Let me tell you who it is. In addition to being a communications director, a political communications person, a consultant to some of the largest foundations in the world, he's also a former child actor. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Brown. There you are. So you've been many things, Eric, but today you're our co-host on Break Fake Rules.
Humbled and honored. That's all I have to say. I'm just humbled and honored. Actually, I'm going to answer the James Stockdale question. You remember when James Stockdale, who ran for vice president?
Very well. I love this one.
Ross Perot's running mate. He got up in the debates and he said, "Who am I and why am I here?" And I know who I am and I know why I'm here. I am here, Glenn, to be your nanny goat.
Well, do tell.
What is a nanny goat, you might say? So in barns and stables and things like that, you have these thoroughbred horses.
Yes.
But they have so much energy. They need a friend, somebody to kind of ground them and to keep them, calm and that kind of thing. A buddy. I am your nanny goat.
Well, then you're on the wrong day. I think you're supposed to be on with Jamie then. I think I'm not the guy you're talking about.
I am here to pour your drinks and light your cigarettes and laugh at your jokes.
Well, the truth of the matter is, I think everyone should know this. Eric has his own podcast. It's called Let's Hear It. And I had the great honor about, 37 years ago. I think I was on Let's Hear It. And now you are officially co-hosting with me. So this is where I slide over a little bit. You step up to the microphone. We're now equals here. You're no nanny goat, pal. No nanny goat.
I'm still humbled and I'm still honored. I love what you're doing. And I'm very excited to have a little piece of this opportunity to ask kinds of questions about philanthropy, about nonprofits, to talk to really interesting people, and to continue this conversation about how we can all make these institutions better. Just this week, we're seeing this push and pull between Harvard and the White House around a large institution being pressured by the government to change its ways. What are some of the things that you're thinking of in terms of how these large foundations can engage with the world around them, the so-called current context? How are you taking this and how are you talking to your colleagues about it?
Well, I appreciate the invitation. I want to go back to you very quickly and just ask you, as you look at the Harvard, the push and pull on institutions, what comes up for you? My perspective may have been seen and heard by a few people, and I will get to it. But I want to hear how you look at these things.
Well, okay. My brain cannot go anywhere but to the report that was just put out by the Center for Effective Philanthropy that was looking at the disconnect.
I believe that was a couple of weeks ago. That one landed. into our foundation world.
Yes. And for me, it was an absolute depth charge about this disconnect in perceptions between foundations and the nonprofits that they purport to support.
Mm-hmm.
This sense that foundations are saying, yeah, well, things are a little challenging, but we feel pretty good about our prospects. Nonprofits are saying, like, this is the crisis of our lifetimes. Our existences are being called into question. And this level of disconnect, for me anyway, is a sign that we have not figured out the proper role of philanthropy relative to the organizations that they're trying to support. This disconnect is, for me, it's a big, big problem, like an existential problem for philanthropy. How are your colleagues talking about this?
Well, I love hearing you say that, because my take on it is a slightly different one, but very much in alignment with you. You and I have been hanging out around institutional philanthropy for now over a couple of decades. And in that time, we have seen maybe more, but arguably 3 global, if not significantly national crises. So anywhere from the so-called Great Recession to COVID to this artificially created one, which is the government retreating from things governments do, leaving it to the nonprofit sector to figure it out. And what's standing out to me is that we don't know how to do crisis in philanthropy. We just don't. And the part that is most frustrating, scary, in my opinion, is that when a crisis strikes foundations, we protect our things. And that's what's happened this last year and continuing to happen. I actually, to answer your question, I posted to a group of foundation leaders that I know, I said, this report is quite damning. It suggests that nonprofits are experiencing this differently than us. And so how do we want to respond to it? And if there is a chat version of crickets, I experienced it. It's really, really troubling. It's really troubling. And I think underlying it all, it makes it really troubling to me, is that the people I'm talking to are actively engaged in their foundations. And I think that number of all the foundations in our country, which, in case we need to remind everyone, is 150,000 private foundations in the United States, I can name probably 500. And if that is a representative sample of the 150,000 that hold the 2 trillion sitting in these foundations, and they don't know how to respond to crisis, it just seems to undercut everything we claim we have the money for, in my opinion.
There were 2 statistics that made the top of my head come off, and I just think they ought to bear repeating. One is that 40% of nonprofit leaders say that funders have shifted priorities or requirements in ways that are less helpful right now. 40% of nonprofits say their funders are being less helpful at this moment, where I think we can all agree that nonprofits are in a dire strait. Government funding is being withheld. The challenges that they have are extraordinary. And 40% say their funders are being less helpful. That's crazy. And then 20% of foundations say they don't believe foundations have much responsibility to help nonprofits navigate this moment. Just like, folks,
jaw-dropping. It's jaw-dropping.
That sink in.
Your jaw dropped as you heard that. If you're listening to the show, it did.
I need a new jaw, because the one I have is now dropped.
Just a
and so the question,
thing.
As you say, foundations are not built for crisis. Philanthropy, either it's not designed or it has not figured out how to deal with moments like this. That the model doesn't work when things go bad. And therefore, like, what is all this money sitting there for?
Yeah. I mean, well, I won't name names, but used to work for someone who has a view on this for down the road in the future, but it's always about the future.
Yes, right.
We're going to use it in the future, to which I always respond, well, why are you going to be any good at using it in the future when you're not any good at using it now? And maybe that's what learning is all about. The less we give now and learn from, the better we'll be when we give more later, I guess. Is that what it is?
Maybe.
Is that what evaluation and learning is all about? I've never understood it myself.
I have no idea. But so this is interesting. Can we segue into our guest, Glenn?
Well, I was feeling that too.
You feeling the segue?
So, yeah, give a little bit of some flavor of what might come next.
Wow, as your nanny goat, I'm already feeling your vibes.
I'm trying to get it in there. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Little vibe.
So our guest today is Marlene Engelhorn, and she lives in Austria, and she has inherited a great deal of wealth. And rather than hoard it, and rather than, set it up for perpetuity, and rather than try to control it, she is embarking on giving it away. And I cannot wait to speak to her about how she's doing this. What's so exciting about this guest?
One thing that I think she will get into is, I'm going to tie our topics here, where you started us and where we're going, is this idea of institutionalizing philanthropy. And I know from reading and speaking with her that she's very opposed to this idea. But the thing I do wonder about, which goes to the core of this report, at the end of the day, which I just think we lose touch with this, I just want to say it because I have to remind myself, foundations are just a pile of cash, right? It was a contribution made by a donor to a C3 organization to be distributed. And we build these gigantic institutions around the money with cool brands, which you are an expert in building. You did a wonderful job with Hewlett. Congratulations. I'm very proud of the work that Claire and I have done here at the Stupski Foundation. We do a lot of work to get the brand. We do a lot of work to build the legacy. We do a lot of work to develop the strategy. We do a lot of work to build the staff, to build great benefits for the staff. All this stuff becomes barriers to giving, in my opinion. And that's why in the face of crisis, there's a fear of losing the institution. And as a result, the capital gets stuck in the institution. I'm curious how Marlene will talk about that.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling she's going to have some ideas that, even you haven't brought up. I have a sense that her approach to philanthropy in so many ways breaks fake rules of how we think about how to do philanthropy. Also, I have to tell you, I don't know if the previous guests have, or your previous co-hosts have given you the super duper plug on your book, because just like the top of my head is coming off about the CEP report, your book made the top of my head come off twice in good ways. But I do think it is such an important contribution to the conversation around this work. And I think Marlene is going to add to that as well. So I'm looking forward to this.
I have a feeling control is going to be a big part of what she talks about. Not the book, but the concept, which I do try to get into in the book. And now I am humbled and honored that you would even bring it up. So thank you. Hey, Break Fake Rules listeners, Glenn here. I want to share some news with you. I wrote a book. It's called Control: Why Big Giving Falls Short. You've heard me question philanthropic big giving before, but there's an issue that no one wants to talk about. Philanthropy has a control problem, and it's costing communities dearly. Billionaire donors get major tax breaks to park money in charitable funds. Today, there's over $2 trillion stockpiled in these accounts, growing to $18 trillion by 2050. Can you believe that? That's money that's just sitting there, often invested in for-profit investments instead of being put to work in communities. For years, I believed that centering donors was the best way to maximize the impact of every dollar donated. I even championed that system, and I was wrong. In Control, I take you inside these institutions to show how excessive donor control and the fake rules that protect it keep money from moving when it's needed most. The good news is we created this system, and we can change it. Pre-order your copy of Control: Why Big Giving Falls Short.
Our guest today is Marlene Engelhorn, an Austrian activist and founder of Tax Me Now, who inherited many millions of dollars from a family fortune.
That's right.
And decided to give most of it away. This is going to be such an interesting conversation. Marlene, thank you so much for coming on to Break Fake Rules.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And just a little correction, I am co-founder of Tax Me Now, not founder. I never did this alone. But yeah, happy to be here.
And modest.
Talk about stuff.
Also very modest.
So, Marlene, your story is very unique, I think, globally. I can't recall a story of another next generation inheritor taking the approach you have. We have seen in the United States a segment of the next generation and the next generation starting to kind of question the way their elders practiced philanthropy. That's what we call it. And have done some pretty interesting things. And I'm sure you know many of these people from prior conversations with you. I think you do know a few of these folks that have done things a little differently. You, I think, have completely broken most of the fake rules of philanthropy. And so for those who are not aware of your story, I was hoping maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you went about distributing your wealth and engaging in the philanthropy that you did and have.
Okay, so as an analogy, I'd like to bring up that there's a thing called rich fragility, which is very close to, you could like say, white fragility or male fragility. Basically, you're in power and you can't deal with anybody challenging that power and making you understand that just because you're in power doesn't mean you should be in charge. But to get back to the question, I just chose to be as transparent as possible and to grant a wider public to hold me accountable to what I say through what I do. And I think that's the main difference. I don't want to protect my privilege. I want it gone. I think that's the only genuine approach to philanthropy. It's to basically make sure that it abolishes itself. Any philanthropic approach that is not interested in abolishing philanthropy is dishonest, in my opinion, because it relies on the fact that people will be depending on your goodwill, which I find is the worst kind of relationship you can have to a person, that they are depending on you when they don't have to necessarily, because they could just have the means to deal with their own shit on their own terms. But instead, they have to get as close as begging for your mercy, which I think is vile and very, very disrespectful, which is why I wanted to break out of quote unquote classical philanthropy, which is not to say that there are not also people who try to do their very best with whatever situation they're in. But at the same time, ideally, we fix this structurally and don't ask or wait for individuals to figure out, maybe I'm part of the problem and maybe I can be part of the solutions. Like, yeah, well, ideally part of the solution means part of social movements for a bigger picture of justice that essentially abolishes philanthropy, essentially abolishes the privilege of deciding over another person's lived reality.
Well, one of the tools that you've created is this Citizens Council to help distribute these funds. There's another fake rule that you're breaking in that you're not making the decisions about where the funds are going to. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so with the Guter Rat für Rückverteilung, which roughly translates to Good Counsel for Redistribution, and it's a little wordplay that actually half works in English, because council with CIL means that you have like an assembly, but counsel with SEL would mean that you give someone advice in a way. And in German, you have a saying that says, if I translate it, that good counsel is expensive. And it's kind of like a play with all of this, the wording like around it. So basically, I just initiated it. I saw that this is something that exists, and I figured it's the most democratic and transparent way I can possibly think of, and participatory way I can possibly think of, that would make random ordinary people become the centerpiece of the decision-making process. And I think this is so important because it's also at the core of the democratic principle that we understand that every single person who has a right to vote, and now we can discuss about voters' rights, but like, let's pretend that everybody who should be able to vote also has a right to vote, that they are equally as important to the discussion of what the country should look like and what the laws should be. And that means I just wanted to prove that any random group of people can easily outperform any rich person like me, because they will be able to address the issues of redistribution and also of like everything that comes with it. Social justice questions, anti-racism, how to fight the patriarchy, all these things, right? They can address these things from all various angles that you need in order to get a really good, wholesome picture of what you're dealing with and how to deal with it. And they have done an amazing job of that. And also the organizational team and the facilitation team have done amazing jobs. I was merely there to say, could we do this? And I decided to pull myself out of the equation as soon as possible in order to make sure that these people could work properly, because it's their project now. I just merely put the money in a special account and paid for everything. And that's it. I took no decisions other than that.
Well, that was where I was going with the question, because it's possible that American philanthropy might be interested in what you did. I say that possible. I was putting quotes around it because there's a fascination, I think, more than a practice of interest in something we call participatory grant making over here, where in principle, people are doing what you're suggesting. There's money put into an account, and that covers both the operations and the grant making. And I can tell you from my own experience, we do have some participatory work that goes on at the Stupski Foundation. But in the earliest days of it, one of my prior boards was scared to death of it. And it all came down to the word control. In fact, one of the board members, when we proposed a couple of participatory bodies, asked, why would anyone want to give up control of these resources? So if someone wanted to work their way into it, you made a big jump and you have some very strong views. You said them right up front about how you see philanthropy. For those that are further down, or I don't know what side of the spectrum they're on, but further away from you and interested in where you're going, what are some first steps you would recommend to them to get into this type of grant making? Because I'm sorry to say, I think they're going to need steps. I don't think they're ready to leap.
Perfectly fine. I also needed to have the time to be able to understand everything and to unlearn and to deconstruct how I was brought up and socialized as an extremely wealthy individual, thinking that I inherited this money and now I can save the world. And frankly, I'm just insanely lucky. On top of everything else, privilege-wise, I'm also it's not even normal how much luck I have. And a lot of this is really purely random luck and not just privilege luck, which also, of course, I have. But I have two very good friends, insanely cool people, also with very well embedded within the organizing scene. And they both independently of each other, not knowingly, told me to my face when I was thinking out loud about all these grand ideas I had about what to do with the money and blah, blah, blah. They were like, Marlene, nobody has waited for you. You're not necessary to any of this. You need to understand, just because you own this wealth, that doesn't mean that your contribution is meaningful. There's people who already do the job. They do the work. They do everything that is necessary. They're the experts. They know how to do it. They know what is needed. They know how to budget all of that. You know none of these things. And ideally, if you want things to just get done, trust these people to know to do their work. Even if they make mistakes here and there, who says that you won't? Don't pretend you're on a high horse that you wouldn't make a mistake just because you took everything into your own hands. You can just give them your money and they will do an excellent job of it. And don't even think that it's a lot of money. On the grander scheme of things, it isn't. Fair enough.
Yeah.
And I was extremely grateful because that is one of those, you call them hard truths, right? Or tough love, when somebody tells you to your face.
I was going to say, it's the philanthropy version of tough love you were given there.
I was lucky to have these people interact with me when I was saying silly things, and to be frank with me and to remain friends of mine and not be yet another rich kid who has not understood it, right?
Well, if I might ask, I have a sense that giving up control might also have some real benefits, and that by allowing other folks to make these decisions, you will learn about things that you didn't know about before. Any great surprises from the grant making that you've experienced so far?
Well, great surprises. I already knew I wasn't necessary, but I was enjoying that it was proven so neatly with the project. I think the biggest surprise probably is that you need such good organization and facilitation for a project like with a citizens' assembly, for instance. You can't just rely on, just because you've had the idea and you've given the thing a name, that therefore, or because it's an instrument that has been used before, that therefore this will just run smoothly. You need people to put in the work and the effort. I think that can't be underestimated, how much organizing work you need and how little people know about democratic practices, actually. A citizens' assembly is a very concrete tool. It's a process and it's a praxis of democracy, of participation. And in my case, it was 50 people for the citizens' assembly. Discuss everything together at all times. But sometimes you need to split up in groups. You need to have more intimate spaces. You might also need to break up even further and make sure that you get 25 pairs of people intimately talking through issues, maybe switching them up afterwards and share back what you hear. And also you need to create pockets of exchange that are molded around the discussion that you're trying to hold and the space you're trying to create. These people created groups to discuss various like aspects of redistribution and wealth inequality, like in terms of if you have all of this money, where to put it. Like there's some people that went into climate and environment, others went into social and housing questions or education and all sorts of things. Being active, politically active, democratically active, and that can't be underestimated how great this is, how empowering this can be to people, because also the first thing everybody said when they were asked, when they just arrived first weekend was, I never would have believed that I would be here and that my voice actually mattered. And that means that your democracy is failing massively if this is the feeling that a representative sample of your population shares unanimously.
Yeah, I think look, there are so many things. You ran through like 100 surprises there. And the biggest takeaway, I think, is the fact that it both enlightens those involved to the level that democracy can be and shines a light on where it's missing now. What's interesting is what you're describing counters a concern that one of our local professors here in the Bay Area wrote about. There are two Robert Reiches in the Bay Area. It's very interesting. There's one at Berkeley and there's one at Stanford. And the one at Stanford, lesser known, wrote a book called Just Giving. And his basic concern is that philanthropy is going to upend democracy. And I think if he's listening right now, he's smiling and thinking, well, maybe there's a foil to my book. And that's your work, Marlene. That's fantastic. And I also want to say that in a matter of about a half hour, I think you've summarized almost all of the fake rules we've covered in this podcast for 2 years. We're right at the end here. We always ask one question, and it usually delivers quite a bit of information. So we're going to ask it of you. What is one fake rule that you encourage others to break out there?
I would encourage everybody to reconsider any way or shape or form you experience individualism, because it's a bullshit lie. And that also is both at the center of trying to protect your privilege and your comfort zone, and at the center of trying to dismantle democracy and to not understanding that alone you can't do anything. Like you're not going to be able to change anything. You're not going to be able to feel anything. You're not going to be able to be alive. You can't. And it's all of the truth and the beauty of life lies in community and in the collective. I think it's really the most crucial thing. Understand that you have to be in community and that organizing takes time. But frankly, people are all we have.
Well, individualism is a bullshit lie is the T-shirt I'm going to be wearing around town. Marlene Engelhorn, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.